Okay, so welcome to this plot update video. The first one I'm going to do is all about what happened over the season. And I'm going to have a really brief overview just so you get a sense of what we covered before I go into what's going to happen over the time jump. So there were lots of leagues. There was a Wednesday league, a Thursday league, and a Friday league, and there was a weekend league. And then we did all these summer camps. So I'll start with the weekday leagues and the weekend league, kind of give you an overview of that. Then we'll go into summer, and then we'll see where we end. So to start off, the Wednesday league, they were in Pinnacle, and defending the island, trying to keep it safe. There were lots of invaders from Darkhold Dragonsworn and Athamenid Aparia, and then also sort of infiltration-y stuff with some vampire stuff they were trying to solve, but it was pretty minor there. They mostly they started in kind of this really big plot involving the sleeping sickness, they called it, which is all these elder people in this village who were falling asleep, and they wouldn't dream. Basically, they would fall asleep and then they'd wake up and they felt like they were exhausted and they couldn't really, they were never really covering, and more people were falling asleep and not dreaming and becoming exhausted. And they kind of discovered this place called like a Golden Gateway, which was like a space you could go into, and it was this weird world with like, kind of felt like the Wildwood a little bit, with like a strange circus and a forest with a river on top of it. And they kind of ended up solving this plot a bit and kind of closing it up and getting a boon from this energy when they discovered that there were these kids who were kind of going in and out of this Golden Gateway, and it was somehow connected, and that they had to like find these people in that vision who were seemed like people that were in the village, and they had to like find them in there who were lost and bring them back out. And they found a lantern while they were in there that gave them some powers too. In the end, they kind of solved that, but they never sort of really figured out why this had all happened. There were some weird, creepy undead things that kept on showing up there, and they weren't sure what they were about. They ended up, doing lots of the missions with like different dungeons and places they were finding it around there, with like interactions with different attackers, trying to assault on different edges, and in the end, there was one mission that they never did, which was this animated clothing that was just wandering the streets, and it was always a problem, but never a big enough problem. They just never solved it, and it was on the board literally the entire year. And nobody ever like really did. I think every area they did a little bit, but they never really solved it. So that was a Wednesday league. There's a lot more. I can't go into it. It's like way too much. Thursday league also tons to go into, but trying to nutshell it, they did a lot of adventures into the Wildwood, discovering what the Wildwood was like now as it's changed and grown. They discovered a lot of things about the Wildwood elves and trying to protect their forest and trying to keep the place safe. The characters tried to keep the area safe. It was very overgrown, and so there's like all the little tiny areas that the elves could control. And Athamenid Aparia was attacking and kind of laying these sort of land or sea mines at sea, where the ships would blow them up. They were Morganti, very dangerous out there. They did lots of missions all around through the forest, trying to discover what was going on with something maybe that involved the Dream Gates and some other places, like other people trying to invade different edges, but they did a pretty good job of keeping it, functioning. And towards the end, they discovered like a kind of a demon plot where this huge like demon effect started to occur, and they weren't sure what caused it and then they finally did solve it. It was very difficult for them to solve it, almost like expanded out and annihilated the entire area. At the center of it was this hobbit child who had this wand of the demon form that she had, and apparently she said that she had like this, she'd gone into this golden space and that she'd found this, and that girl was called Reiki's Longears, and apparently that was, that she needed to get taken back to Pinnacle because that's actually where she'd come from, and they couldn't really figure out why she would be here now, or how she could have ended up here, but they sailed her back and dropped her off and tried to defend the area from attackers during all of this also. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit there. So they solved a lot of these things. There were like a lot of like lectures and Harper work they had to do, and that's sort of settled out at the end with like trying to hold off as many threats as they could to Spireguard. Spireguard was sort of on the brink of collapse as they sort of ended that. Now the Friday League, they were in Blackspire, and of the Blackspire Mountains, protecting a place called Keep Troldoon. In Keep Troldoon, they were doing a lot of learning about the trolls that live there. Also, like the Moath tribe, which is a tribe of shamans, and invite all people in. all different types of species to live with them, and they're totem worshippers, so they kind of do lots of missions and quests with that revolve around the totem that they get each day. They kind of discovered this like lesser demon early on at a dungeon that had all these bone warriors, and they found out that the demon was pretty easy to defeat. They all like kind of tag teamed to just like took it out pretty quick, and then trapped it in this space. They kind of knew it was trapped until they got a certain totem, which would be Black Panther, and they did pretty good. They did lots of other missions, fighting off Athamenid and Paria, fighting Dark Earl Dragonshorn, fighting the Infernals who were also there, and they kind of made an alliance with the Angelics to like keep these things at bay. They noticed that some of the Dark Earl Dragonshorn were trying to get their hands on some sort of like a cave that had these weird eggs in it, and they thought maybe there's something to do with dragons there. In the end, though, they in the spring they pulled the Black Panther totem, and this released the demon, and they realized it was like this much more powerful form, and they had to find its name, and in order to defeat it, they discovered its name was being hidden in this cave far up in the Dark Spike territory, where the Uruk-hai who worship demons up there, and they thought they should try to go get there and get it, but they ran into all these Dark Hero ogres that were just armies of them. It was just awful. They couldn't get there. They tried to deal with these Thunderbirds that were circling Mount Sezelath, and they thought they weren't sure what they're about. They kept getting weird visions about someone with like some sticks, like doing some sort of ritual, and like lava, and like something about an eagle, and like some sort of like belt or something. They weren't sure. So they in the end they ended up finding these rocks in this cave area that they'd been studying, and they got the rocks out, and they figured they might be like petrified dragon eggs maybe. And so they tried to like take care of them. Some of them were taken by some sort of dragon guardian-like creatures, and they think the Dark Earl Dragonstorm was trying to get their hands on them, and they thought that's bad. They got one. They did a whole bunch of riddles, very odd like interactions with this thing. Tried to keep it warm, tried to like keep it safe, and then finally at the very end of the season, it kind of hatched into like all these little tiny fairy dragons, little really tiny dragons, and they bonded with all the different people that were there, as well as some other people, and each of them has a sort of an odd little characteristic or behaviors. All of them are different types of dragons, and they sort of bonded with each of the characters that were there, and became sort of like familiars for them or with them. So that was sort of the Friday League. In the end they ended up sort of trying to gather up all the energy of these Thunderbirds that they think were going to be taken by Athamenid and Paria, and they took them away to Mytholin to try to get them to the shamans, because they had a theory that they need to be taken to somewhere for these sticks or something. So that was the Friday League. Now the Weekend League has been working up in Menanossin, and they've had lots that going on, because there's a very advanced player league, and then there's like sort of a lower layer league, and they kind of blend with each other. And they've been like fighting off very similar troops, Athamenid and Paria, Dark Earl Dragonshorn, the Infernals, all but much closer in that case. And they were discovering that that there was sort of a plot that seemed to be sort of targeting humans. That humans were going to be were sort of on the chopping block in some sort of way, and that something was thinking about maybe destroying humans because humans were a problem for some reason. They started running into Athamenid and Paria, who was using these fissures from back when Shabarax was a thing, to have undead travel across, and that they had figured out how to use these fissures to transfer their troops from Serpentin way down south up north, but nobody really thought much about that, just that they could use it, and that was all. There was a whole lot of plot around releasing dragons. The amount of dragons that got released in this league was huge. They released black dragons, and then they discovered around this area called the Vanishing Point. They released platinum dragons from another area. They ran into iron dragons in another area further to the north. They were like constantly bumping into like dragons that seemed like they were in some sort of like stone form, or in some sort of like totem-like form, and then they were doing things that would release those dragons or awaken those dragons, and then sometimes getting boons. But the dragons sometimes would just literally protect them, which is very odd for dragons. Dragons usually don't take that kind of an active role in protecting of people. But maybe it's because the Darkhold Dragonsworn, which is a bunch of people that worship dragons and some dragons themselves, are actively attacking everybody. And so maybe the dragons see this as like a war they can be involved in. So plot-wise, a lot of the plot started to develop around the idea that maybe there was a particular plot to sort of destabilize or destroy humans in some way that the players were trying to figure out what that was about, and that slowly they were discovering that maybe the vampires and the Darkhold Dragonsworn, Athman and Deparia, and many groups were trying to were vying for some sort of key people or trying to find certain people. It sort of turned out at the end that they think that the people they were trying to sort of find were maybe these Wildwood orphans. So there were only a few of them kind of left in the world that come from the Wildwood. Orphans are taken into the Wildwood often, and they sort of change into these animal-like versions. And they often forget who they were in the past, and they come out with new powers, looking more like an animal, but walking on two legs and talking and this sort of thing. And often they have odd powers. And last season they discovered a whole batch of them that had been captured by vampires, and the vampires were using them to sort of transform them into powerful undead beings. And so they knew that the vampires wanted them for that, but they weren't really sure why. So it seems like these people seem to be important in that plot in the Weekend League. They were also important there. And in particular, people who were playing their Wildwood Orphans, the few that had survived, started to kind of be focused or targeted by enemy troops. And eventually one of them got captured. One of the most high ranking of these Wildwood Orphans was captured and taken into the Plague Zone, and was transformed or changed into a vampire. And this seemed to spell doom for many people, because the transformation of this particular Wildwood Orphan was apparently very, very significant. At the same time, a very powerful warrior, the Legatus, was also captured, and they had to try to rescue that person using a very strange way to go through someone's mind, it seemed like, into the Plague Zone, and then rescue them. They really weren't sure how that worked. They ended up in the Plague Zone, rescued this person, and then brought them out. But it all seemed to be through some sort of strange riddle encounter that crossed them across a valley. It was very dreamlike. And on the way out, they got caught in this strange space where they were fighting all of these weird versions of themselves that were way worse and could mana drain them and turn them into blue wraiths. It was awful. And they managed to escape, but not unscathed. In the end, some dragons got killed by some of these really dangerous vampires that they encountered in the Plague Zone. They discovered a lot of much worse vampires than they'd ever realized were around. And they started to figure out what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this situation? So that kind of brings us up to speed with the summer, with where we get to in the summer. With the summer plot, the summer plot kind of takes us forward from there. And I think I'm going to pause there and do a second video for all the summer plot, just so that these videos don't get too long.